Hi, my name is Amber Resney and I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Clinical Exercise Physiology at the University of New England. I'm completing this presentation as a part of Exercise 335, Motor Control and Human Development, as coordinated by Dr. Dominic McNeil. This presentation is based on a lab activity we did, and the topic is relating to motor control and motor variation. So in this lab we examined 3 functional tasks that are important for everyday life, and these are posture, mobility and hand control. Being healthy functioning adults, these are seemingly automatic and insignificant processes, but what I'm going to discuss today is the actually complex processes behind these. So first up is posture, and posture is just essential to every day, whether we're sitting or standing, but we don't realise that we're doing it all the time. It's basically the ability to control our body in space, and it can be broken down into 2 main components. There's stability and orientation. So orientation can refer to the relationship between our body segments and also to our body as it relates to the environment. Postural stability is also known as balance, and it relates to the control of our centre of mass as it relates to our base of support, which is our contact with the stable surface. So this could be our feet to the ground or our legs on a chair. So postural control varies a lot depending on the task and the environment. And there's always some aspect of posture, and it's the stability and the orientation that mostly varies with the task and the environment. So what we did was we examined our posture as we were standing there, what happened when we leaned forwards and backwards more and more, and then how it changed when we stood on our toes and leaned forwards and backwards as well. And then we did the same with our eyes closed. So what we found was that with the motor processes involved, when we're standing still, we're not actually standing completely still. There's always an element of postural sway involved. It's just really, really small. And this reflects the interplay between the destabilizing forces that are acting on our body. There is a perfect alignment as shown in this diagram, and it's the vertical line of gravity as it relates to the tonically active muscles around it. And this is used to maintain equilibrium or a stable state. So when we were standing on our toes and tried to lean backward or forward, we found that we were already isometrically contracting some of those postural muscles. And so when we lean forwards and backwards, those muscles are already activating. So with regards to cognitive processes and postural control, there's less cognitive processes and attention demands involved. Unless we're initiating a movement or changing our posture. But what some research has found is that with aging, the attentional demands for posture increase as sensory information decrease. So as we perform multitask movements, we can't provide sufficient attention to our posture as we age, and there's research suggests that this can lead to falls and imbalances in elderly. In regards to the sensory and perceptual processes, what we found in our lab activities was that vision plays a crucial role. So it provides information about the position of our head and therefore our body. Basically, when we closed our eyes and tried to lean forwards and backwards, we increased our postural sway. And this is consistent with heaps of studies that have been done. But however, it also proves that posture isn't an autonomic process. So when we closed our eyes, we could still stand upright. So postural control can also be used to improve visual performance. So there's a really strong connection between vision and postural control. For example, sway is reduced when we're trying to perform a visually complex task such as throwing a dart. In the swaying activity, it can be said that an ankle strategy was used because it's believed that this is used for postural demands when there's only a small disturbance and there's still a stable base of support. However, when we were standing on our toes and performed the same activity, it can be said that a hip strategy was used, as this was more involved in movement of the centre of mass and when there's a large disturbance, such as an unstable base of support, like when we're standing on our toes. These figures display the difference between an ankle and a hip strategy and the different muscle synergies required to prevent a forward or a backward sway. So feedback and feed-forward control of posture really relate back to the sensory systems as well. So feed-forward control refers to postural responses that are made in anticipation of a voluntary movement that is potentially destabilizing. So in all of the activities that we performed of leaning forwards and backwards and standing on our toes, It can be said that these were all feed-forward processes because they were voluntary movements and we could anticipate the destabilizing effects that they were going to have. But feedback, on the other hand, occurs in response to external disturbances. So the tasks we performed in the lab were all voluntary and anticipatory, but if someone were to push you in the back, even if I couldn't see them, so my vision would be involved, but my somatosensory and my vestibular responses would, because I could feel that they pushed me in the back. I'd get feedback from that, and then I'd get feedback from the movement of my head and trunk forwards, and I would be able to respond to that because the feedback would tell me that I am falling, and then my muscle synergies would be able to activate and either prevent me falling or let me step ahead and stop myself from landing on my face. Okay, so gait or mobility or walking or locomotion is an extremely complex coordinated movement. It involves postural control, which we just discussed, and also progression or actual movement, and also adaptation, which is really important to it. So in the lab activities we basically just observed some different speeds of walking and running, and then observed the variations of them and then all the similarities as well. So when we were walking, we noticed it was more of a relaxed posture, our body was more in line, so we maintained our postural control. When we went to faster walking, we had stiffer posture, longer steps, we increased our ground force contact, and our body was more kind of leaned forward more. And when we went back to jogging, it was a bit more relaxed again, with a bit more upper body coordination, but not as stiff. And then when we were running as fast as we could, there was longer steps, we had our propulsion kind of came off our toes, we were leaning forwards a lot, and there was a lot of upper body coordination. So basically the differences in all of these are all about relating to the muscle activation. So in the running and the jogging, there's larger motor units being recruited, and also to the progression or the propulsion of our center of mass. And then also the coordination of our upper body. So in terms of our cognitive processing with our gait, it seems to be more important than when we're just standing there. So in the activities that we did, our cognitive demands weren't as high because it was a predictive environment, stable ground. We were just running or walking in a straight line. But when there's increased sensory input, then our cognitive processes, our attentional demands are higher. And then if we try and divide our attentional demands between maintaining our posture and our speed and our direction between, say, any other tasks, then we notice that our gait and our mobility suffers. So the motor components involves many complex muscle coordinations and synergies, and so we'll discuss these in terms of muscle synergies. So in terms of sensory and perceptual feedback, these are used to help determine our speed, like our urgency and our intention. Our visual system is crucial for avoiding obstacles and adapting to, say, uneven terrain. So it's different if we were running inside compared to running outside. The movement synergies, as I kind of mentioned, are really complex when it comes to walking and locomotion, and they vary depending on the individual, their coordination, the environment, and the task. But there are some common characteristics that still exist, and so these involve our swing and our stance phase. No matter what we're doing, there is a swing and a stance phase, and these really determine the velocity and the direction and our adaptation to what we're doing. Also common to all the gait patterns that we observed in our activity was the flexion at all of the joints, but not necessarily in the same order. So there was always hip, knee and ankle flexion involved, but when we went up to the sprinting, our propulsion really came off our toes, so we took out the heel strike component. So obviously there's slightly different ankle activation and coordination compared to when we're just walking. And so the muscle synergies can change and the activation can change depending on the activity or the speed that we're moving at. And so this feed back and feed forward control are really important in helping us to adapt to our environment. The tasks that we performed were just in a lab, so it was stable, it was a predictable environment, and we all knew what to expect. However, our proprioception and our vestibular system and our sensory system and our somatosensory system are all really important in providing feedback, especially in, say, an unknown environment. We try and take a step, but there's nothing there, so our foot is stepping down onto the air. That's when our proprioception and our vestibular system and our joint receptors in that foot tell us that I haven't hit the ground yet, there's obviously not a step here, and then that's when our muscle synergies will activate to prepare that foot for like a bigger impact, and then to stop us from falling over when we do, and then we can adapt to the environment because the feedback is allowing us to do that. So hand control is the basis of most fine motor skills, and it involves 4 main components. So these are locating an object, reaching for it, grasping the object, and then manipulating it in your hand. And this is really based on your intention, so what you intend to use the object for, and then adaptive and anticipatory processes to use the object and pick it up. There's also a lot involved with force control, so a power or a precision grip, which we'll discuss. So in the lab activity, we looked at picking up different objects, so picking up a pen versus a water jug, and then what was involved in using that jug to fill up a glass, picking up the glass when it was empty versus when it was full, and looking at the variations we did within our hand control in those different movements. So in terms of the motor processes involved, there's a lot of musculoskeletal components involved, coordination, obviously, and the biomechanical relationships between all the body segments that are involved. So in regards to the higher level processing and the cognitive control, that also relates to the motor processes as well. We know that the posterior parietal cortex is involved with encoding the goals for the movement. So because each movement was dependent on the intention of the object, the posterior parietal cortex is very involved. And the intended hand formation and orientation is processed on the reaching aspect, on the reaching component of the movement. So we dictate our hand shape and where we're going as we're reaching towards it. So what we found was that when we're picking up a pencil, a precision grip was used, and then when we're picking up the glass or the jug, a power grip is used. And these force grips are dictated by the anterior portion of the posterior parietal cortex. So the sensory and perceptual components involve perception being used to know what the intended use of the object is, and then how to go about that. And this sends information from the visual cortex to the temporal lobe. So sensory cues are used to activate the spinal reflex pathways, and it's these that would be used to compensate for any discrepancies or differences in weight that were unknown. So as we went to pick up the water jug, if we weren't sure exactly how heavy it was, as we lift it up, our sensory information can provide the information to activate extra neurons that are needed to lift the extra weight. So this also relates to the feedback control system. So Bernstein's theories of muscle synergy tell us that hand movement synergies are required to control the high number of degrees of freedom. Because there's many degrees of freedom involved in any movement of fine motor control of the hands, hand postural synergies are predicted by neural activation patterns within the primary motor cortex. Muscle synergies also help aid the speed and precision. So planning arm movements requires activation sequences of individual muscles. So in regards to feedback and feed-forward control of these movements, they're largely voluntary movements, and we all had an understanding and previous experience of the task, so we could anticipate and adapt to the movements using that knowledge. But we use intrinsic properties such as knowledge about the object's shape and size, and then extrinsic properties such as its orientation and the distance and its location through our body. We use all of these cues to draw on our knowledge of how to perform the task to pick up the pencil and the glass and the water jug that we did. So our feedback control, as we discussed, comes a lot from our sensory, our visual cues, and also from our skin mechanoreceptors and our proprioceptors in our joints for when lifting different weighted objects like the full glass and the full jug. These provide the feedback so that we can adjust and make adaptations accordingly. The feed forward control is used extensively in these processes when we perform them because we've got prior experience and we could anticipate the movements we were doing and we knew our intention of the movements. There's a lot of feed forward control involved in these.
So hopefully you can tell that there's a wide range of systems, variations and characteristics involved in fundamental movement tasks, which also means a huge number of areas that complications can arise from. Thanks for watching.